there, cherry pies. Welcome to this Q&A. Thank you so much for asking me questions. I am going to be taking questions today from a couple of my previous Q&A question requests on Instagram, and also questions that have been filling up my inbox lately. So I'm just going to make a start and see how far I get. What do you do when you feel like you have no direction and there's so much to do, whether in your practice or self-developmentally? When I feel like everything's on top of me, when there's just so many different things I need to achieve or I want to achieve, and I feel like I don't know where to start, my strong tendency is to pick up a pen, grab some paper and do some paper planning. And if I feel really overwhelmed and really overwrought with different responsibilities, that might start with just simply doing a brain dump, where I just get all of the crap out of my head and I write whatever comes to mind. And it might be a jumble of different things that I want to achieve. So menial tasks like going and getting some food that I need from the shop, or you know, some toiletries that I need to remember to buy. And it might be emotions and thoughts and ideas and whatnot, or like sort of fractured pieces of projects that I have in mind. So a legit brain dump where it's just anything that needs to come out. And that tends to make me feel like I'm a little bit more emptied out and clear about what really needs to come through in terms of a strategy, in terms of a strong to-do list, which isn't overwhelming, where I actually have decided what my priorities are. So many people struggle with prioritizing. So many people can't figure out what the high priorities need to be, what needs to be placed on the back burner, etc. And there are loads of different techniques for figuring out what your priorities are. You can find so many blog posts, videos, books, etc. on how to prioritize well. And I think different things work for different people. For me, if I feel like everything's just getting on top of me, it's likely that I'm having a little bit of a priority crisis, and I need to think about actually what is time sensitive, what is going to bear the biggest consequence for me if I don't do it, that kind of stuff. And I also usually need to give myself a break. If I'm struggling with direction and I feel like I've got tons to do, I'm probably being exceedingly hard on myself. I'm probably piling the pressure on, and that's not helpful. And I would recommend, if you find yourself in a situation where you're not sure what to do, everything's piling up on top of you, there's a million and one things that you want to achieve, ask yourself, what's your self-talk doing? Are you shit talking yourself? Are you putting yourself in a pressure cooker? Are you telling yourself that you're no good, you'll never be any good, you'll never get all of this shit done? Because those kind of negative stories you're telling yourself, that crappy self-talk, is not going to help you get where you need to be. Somebody wants to know what my favourite music albums or artists are that I've discovered lately. I have recently come across a band that I'd never heard of before, that I feel like I very much should have heard of and should have been aware of, because I like other bands that are kind of similar. But I've never actually heard of Le Dispute until literally probably 2 weeks ago, and I am literally in love with that band. Oh my goddess, just an incredible band. So I'm getting to know Le Dispute's albums and very much enjoying them. I've also discovered a band called Polisa. I don't remember exactly when I discovered them, but they're fucking amazing as well. Really been enjoying listening to their music too. Just the other day I was listening to Light the Torch. They're a metal band and I very much enjoyed Light the Torch. They're actually Howard Jones's new project. He used to be in Killswitch Engage and I fucking love Killswitch. I've never had a chance to listen to Light the Torch before and I really enjoyed them. In terms of electronic music, I would say that my key genres are drum and bass and techno, but lately I have been really more interested in house DJs and house music. Not that I don't have any love for house music, but I'm more interested in going to see house events and see house DJs play. In June I'm going to go get to see the Black Madonna and I'm so excited. And I would also really love to see Jada G play. I think she's an amazing DJ. I would definitely love to catch one of her sets sometime in the not too distant future, hopefully. And I would also like to see Amelie Lenz play as well. Not a house DJ, but nonetheless it seems like I definitely have a thing for seeing the women play. I just want to see female DJs. That's what it's about for me at the moment. Are there any vegetables that you absolutely hate but force yourself to eat? Random question, as you are vegan. No, I don't force myself to eat anything, to be honest. I feel like there's so much lovely, gorgeous, nutritious and delicious stuff that is available to me that I really do enjoy eating. There's little to no point forcing myself to eat something. I must say though, when I became vegetarian years and years ago as a teenager, I did start forcing myself to eat mushrooms, and I never previously enjoyed mushrooms, but I did notice that mushrooms were something that came on a lot of veggie pizzas, and they were in veggie sort of like lasagnas and quiches and pies that you would get in in restaurants and stuff like that. So I just felt like it would be easier if I could get on with mushrooms, and I quickly took to them after a few weeks. It didn't take me long. And I also forced myself to eat nuts when I was in my early 20s. I had a boyfriend who enjoyed pistachios and cashews and walnuts and stuff, and I always hated nuts from when I was a tiny kid. And one night he was just like, just try some pistachios, they're so delicious. So I closed my eyes and I tried some pistachios, and I imagined that they were crisps because I was so disgusted by the idea of eating nuts. I was like, oh, I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it. There was a real ick factor to it for me. But I tried the pistachios, I quickly warmed up to them, and now I really love pistachios, I love walnuts. So yeah, there's a few different kinds of nuts that I enjoy. Not peanuts. Peanuts are gross. Peanuts just need to be packed up and flown off in a Buick to space, please. Ugh. Ugh, even the smell of them is just, no, it's wrong. I have found shamanic journeying to be a useful tool to receive messages. I was wondering if there were contemporary witch journeying practices that don't use the Native American culture. You know, I think with shamanic journeying, there are loads of people doing that kind of thing. They're leading journeys or they're taking part in journeys that are not directly connected to ideas that come from First Nations tribes. And to me, the most important thing really is that I create my own way of doing it, and that I kind of approach it from my own perspective. And that's true of everything I do with my magic, my ritual, my journeying, etc. One thing that I've found to be really, really helpful is the use of voice recording devices to create my own journey, and I've done that quite a few times and I really enjoy that, and I would recommend that to anyone. I really would. You can devise your own journey, you can take yourself through your own journey, and of course, you know, if you've got someone that you're close to, someone that you trust, someone who's been on journeys before or understands the value of journeys, purchase a drum and have them take you on a journey. It doesn't have to have anything to do with ideas that come from Native American tribes or from cultures with which you're not associated. It can very much be something where you sit down and you design the journey, you plan the strategy for what the journey is going to be, or as I said, you know, turn yourself over to someone you trust to create the journey for you. I have been taken on journeys by other people, and I've also created journeys for myself. I have done, you know, guided journeys online. This idea of just going to another realm and figuring things out, meeting with figures that impart knowledge to you, walking with an animal ally, that kind of thing. I think that you can do that in a way that honours your own perspective and gives you something truly meaningful without kind of taking from something that really doesn't mean anything to you, that is just kind of conveniently extracted from its original meaning. I think there's so many people doing so many innovative things. To me, I'm not a follower. When it comes to me designing anything like that, thinking about how I want to do it, thinking about how it makes sense for me, I may go out there and have a look for some resources that don't take from, you know, cultures to which I don't belong. But the interesting thing for me, and the thing that I would much prefer to do, is to create my own thing. And I think that's really the message that I try to put out to other people as well, is that it is very much about leaning into what it is that you need and what it is that makes sense for you. Do you read tarot for yourself? And if so, how do you stay objective? I do read tarot for myself in a few different ways. So when I do my altar work, which happens generally daily, there are days where I don't go to the altar, but generally it will be daily. When I do that work, I do draw cards for myself quite regularly, but to me that's not the same as doing a full-on tarot reading which is about a specific topic. So for me, I may very well draw a card from the deck that represents my matron, and a card that represents the Blessed Virgin, who's also a very important divine feminine archetype that I walk with on my journey, and I may get messages from them, get insights from them, lean into their support, lean into their energies for the day. And that to me is something where I can remain largely objective, and sometimes the cards will really speak to me on a very deep level, and sometimes, you know, it will just be something to think on, but it won't necessarily profoundly provide a kick in the arse for me. So day to day it depends how it goes and how I'm feeling and what's coming through. But the big kind of long spreads where I sit down and I design, you know, a 6-card spread or a 10-card spread about a specific subject, those readings I do for myself, but I don't do them super regularly. I'm not really over the top with them. I don't do them every full moon or every dark moon, and I'm not saying it's wrong to do that, but I think for me that would be overkill, because my readings are very in-depth, there's a lot to process, and on top of that, as you rightly, you know, noted, you do have to remain objective when reading your own cards, and that does tend to be more of a complex process. It is more difficult to do that most of the time than it is when you read for others. Two things that help me to remain as objective as I I possibly can when I'm doing those longer spread designs where I'm really leaning into a specific concern or a specific theme. The first is making sure that I'm in a good place to do one of those long sort of more specialist readings. So making sure that I've had a good night's sleep, making sure that my belly is full of good nutritious things, I'm hydrated, and I am emotionally feeling stable. And that means that I'm not really angry, I'm not really teary, I'm probably not likely to read for myself on something that is very contentious if I have PMT or I'm actually menstruating. Those kinds of things are important to note. I need to be in a good space, I need to feel relatively emotionally stable. I'm not going to go and do a big long spread design about something I'm super pissed off about if I'm still super pissed off, you know, and I'm not going to do a reading for myself if my hormones are all over the shop. So that's the first thing. Second thing that helps me with objectivity is that I always do set spread designs where every single card has its purpose and has its intention, and that really allows me to be far more objective than it would if I just pulled and did a free reading with no spread designs, where you just lean into every card and you let your intuition take you. I actually don't even do that with my client readings. I like to have set spread designs where every card has its function. But I think when reading for myself, this is doubly important because it really allows me to remain objective. I'm not letting every single card take me in 100 different directions. I can't choose to interpret the card any way I want to. The card is connected to an intention. It's connected to a specific thing. So one will represent the obstacle. One will represent, you know, how I'm being my own worst enemy in the situation. One will represent what I need to be working towards next. So with those spread designs, it makes objectivity much easier in my view. What hobbies do you have besides tarot and witchy stuff? I really enjoy collage. I really love making art. I have an art book on the go all the time, and I do collage and mixed media images. I also write poetry, and I sometimes still do write short stories, but it's very rare that I write short stories. I do write poetry. I've always got at least one poetry book on the go. I really enjoy creative writing and that kind of thing. I like playing with words, so that's something that I really enjoy that's not connected to witchy stuff. I'm also really into rave culture and dance culture and festival culture. I am very much about that life, 110%, darling, and I would consider that to be a really important part of my life, an important part of who I am as a human being. I'm a vegan, and I very much enjoy trying different vegan recipes, experimenting with different things, just kind of changing things up. And you'll notice on my Instagram that I regularly share images of the creations that I've made for myself and my friends. Veganism is really important to me, and I would definitely consider that to be a hobby and a passion that I have outside of the witchy and tarot stuff. And I'm actually moving more into animal rights, animal liberation, animal activism as well. I always have a ton of different things that I'm reading about outside of witchy and tarot stuff too, whether it's politics, whether it's current affairs. I'm really interested in reading about psychology and self-development, and obviously I connect that a lot to my witchy journey and my tarot practice too. Those kinds of topics and those kinds of subjects I'm very much drawn to, and I'm always trying to expand my knowledge in those kinds of areas. And I also really love vintage clothing. I love collecting vintage pieces and secondhand pieces. I'm very interested in extending my wardrobe into weird and wonderful territory, and that's something I would say is a hobby. I'm actually going to a vintage kilo sale this weekend, so I'm really excited about that. If you had narcissists in your life that you couldn't completely cut off, how would you handle situations with them? I would arm myself with as much information as I possibly could, I suppose. I would look at whatever it was that I thought was going on with a person, whether it was narcissistic tendencies or something else, and I would just arm myself with as much information about that as I could get my hands on just for myself. It wouldn't be about diagnosing them or trying to get them to see the error of their ways necessarily. It would be much more about making sure that if I've got to spend time in their presence and in their energy, that I'm centered in what's right for me, and I'm going to make sure that I don't act in a way that's out of alignment with who I am and what I believe. I think that when you're in tense situations with people who are displaying narcissistic tendencies and tend to do that around you on a regular basis, it can cause you to act very much out of alignment with who you are, and I would be trying to avoid doing that. If I had to spend regular time around someone that I felt was just very narcissistic and was displaying those tendencies around me, my main concern would be in being centered. So before I met with them, I would be doing spiritual work. I would be making sure that I was meditating. I was connecting with my pure intention, connecting with me and who I am, calling upon my guides, my ancestors, my deities, whatever spiritual tribe you have at your disposal, and really just making sure that you're set before you go into that situation. That would definitely be a part of it, but also just arming myself with the information. I feel like it's much easier for me to stay cool, calm and collected if I feel like I have more of a handle on why somebody might be behaving that way, or what might be going on within their kind of terrain, if you like, of their psyche that could be causing them to behave in that manner or exhibit those tendencies. And that's one of the many reasons that I love reading about psychology, that I love reading about the human mind, human behavior, human dynamics, etc. And of course there are different theories and it's not like a perfect science, but a lot of the stuff that I've picked up and learned about has helped me to stay centered and stay sane in very high pressure situations where I otherwise might have flown off the handle, or I might have ended up trying to beat someone at their own game by kind of exhibiting similar tendencies to them. And I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that I'm aligned with who I am and how I want to proceed in the situation. So those would be the two things that I would say, you know, spiritual work before you go into the situation, and arming yourself with information to help you to understand why things might be happening the way they are, so that you don't get tangled up in taking it super personally. I've got to say though, I will work very, 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 very hard to maintain a connection in my life that I feel has value, or that I feel it's important to remain a part of. But at the end of the day, the bottom line for me is that there's no one that I wouldn't cut off, family, whatever. For me, self-love is unconditional. It has to be. And as much as I will compromise and I will sacrifice and I will work on things and I will take things to a certain point, there also does have to come a point where I just have to love myself, and if that means walking away, then that's what I've got to fucking do. So I definitely want to put that in there as well. I feel like it's one thing to give advice on this kind of stuff where people might find themselves in situations where they feel they can't get away from a narcissistic personality, but at the end of the day, I think you also have to give yourself permission to know when enough is enough. And if you're just being abused over and over and over and over again, you have to know where to draw your line in the sand. And I feel that I've reached this point on my journey. I reached this point a while ago, to be honest with you. I reached a point where I know where my line in the sand is, and I'm not going to apologize for it. What would be some of your tips for anyone looking to start reading professionally? I read your Work It Baby e-zine, and that has been loads of help for finding motivation and creating new energy. What are some of the things you would recommend for newbie professionals? I'm really glad that e-zine was helpful. That's so cool. I really had a blast making that e-zine. I really enjoyed myself, so it's good that there's still people out there that are getting the most out of it and enjoying it, so that's really cool. I have so much advice for people that want to move into reading professionally, and a lot of it is outlined in various different blog posts, audio files and videos that I've done over the years. Most of them are under the umbrella of Wonderworker, and I'm going to leave below a link to a blog post which is a little bit of a kind of a master post, if you will, with various different links collected within it that will kind of direct you to different audio files and other free resources that I've done, blog posts, videos, etc., that contain tons of different business advice. Just to be very brief, just to give you a couple of things that kind of come to mind right now with regard to reading professionally. I think number one, obviously you've got to know your shit. I think it's really important that people don't move into learning tarot for 3 months and then move straight into reading professionally. I worry about people starting with the intention to read professionally and trying to just make their learning period as short as it can possibly be. You want to make sure that you absolutely have a very tight relationship with your cards. You know the definitions inside out. You've connected on an emotional level with the cards rather than just memorizing book, you know, interpretations. You want to make sure that you are connected passionately with your cards, you're bonded with them, and you can talk about them with ease, and you know that readings that you do for people are going to go smoothly and are going to be sincerely helpful. You've got to want to really be in service to others. I think you've got to always check your intentions for wanting to read professionally. If you notice that whenever you're thinking about the idea of reading professionally, your fantasy is about, you know, being able to spend all day at home in your pajamas with 100 decks around you and fantasizing about, you know, that it's all about you. If it's all about you, then you're probably not starting from the right point. If your fantasy involves using the cards to make a sincere difference in the lives of other people who are genuinely searching for wisdom and understanding and insight, I feel like that's more the correct starting point. And I also want to say, with regard to just building an audience and building a client base, you've really got to get out there and be connecting with the people in the tarot realm. You know, start your social media platforms before you have any products or services. Get your name out there, get people knowing that you are within this community, that you want to talk about things going on in the community, that you're interested in sharing your perspective, and that you're also interested in understanding other people's perspectives and supporting their work. This is absolutely key. You have to come into the community and be an active part of it. You've got to be leaving comments for other people, supporting their work, and being an active voice in the discussions that are going on. And that's how you bring your audience to what you're doing. And then when you are ready to kind of offer products and services, the audience that you've brought to your work and the community that you've built around what you are saying, those people then become your first potential clients. Always keep learning, always be passionate about the tool of tarot. Don't worry about building up a deck collection of 100 different decks. When I started reading professionally, I only read with the Rider-Waite-Smith, and that was the only tarot deck I owned, and I still own significantly less than the average for a professional reader, and it hasn't done me any harm. So don't worry about spending mega bucks on getting your collection, you know, to look epic. That's not important. It's far more important for you to have a tight bond with the cards that you are using, so you can get the best possible readings for clients that you can, and be prepared for it to take time. You know, don't be pushing for your tarot business to be, you know, full-time overnight, profitable in a matter of months. You know, I think that it's important that you're in it for the right reasons, and that you're willing to allow your business to grow slowly and surely with organic growth. And definitely, without any shadow of a doubt, don't do anything like buying audience members, purchasing likes, any of that crap. Don't do that. Really rely on organic growth. Make sure that every single person who hits like or subscribes to your channel or whatever is doing so because they want to be there and they want to engage. Definitely avoid buying Instagram followers, buying any of those things, you know, buying Facebook likes. None of that. Don't do that. Make sure it's all organic growth. You want to know who your audience are, and you want to know that they're there to communicate with you and have a good time with you. I would love to know how you feel about Marseille style pips in tarot. When there's absolutely no image to work with other than a numerical representation, it feels impossible to connect with, and I'm deeply curious on how different readers interpret them. To me, the kind of non-illustrative pips, as I call them, are not useful for beginners. I very much kind of agree that it's very difficult to forge a strong connection with the cards when they are not illustrative, when they're literally just like 4 swords, 3 wands or whatever. I feel like as you go along on your tarot journey and you get deeper and deeper and deeper into your connection with the illustrations and the meanings, you can work much more effectively with non-illustrative pips. Now, there are people that learned to read with things like Marseille tarot, and you know, I'm not saying they're not proficient readers. I'm not saying that they don't approach tarot on a very profound level, but they are in the minority. The vast majority of people who start out on the journey do not find that non-illustrative pips are giving them what they need in terms of forging that initial connection with the card. I'm so glad that I can now read with decks that have those more Marseille style major arcana cards, you know, pips, where it's just 3 swords, it's just 2 cups or whatever, and there's nothing else more to it, because I really enjoy the look of those more traditional decks. In fact, I love Jane Lyle's Lover's Tarot deck. That's one of my all-time favourite traditional tarot decks, and that has the non-illustrative, very basic pips. I'm really glad I can read with those cards now, because I've so much ingested the meaning of the pips and I've got so much of a connection to them that I don't actually require an illustration in front of me to do the business when it comes to reading and interpreting the card. But that took me years. It was a long time before I could read comfortably and in a really kind of like fruity, zesty way with cards that have Marseille style pips. So for me as a beginner, it would have been no good, and I definitely wouldn't choose to mentor a beginner and help a beginner with that deck if it was my choice. I would always say, like, let me stop you there. We need to go in search of a deck that has some illustrations for the pips, because these numerical style, very basic pips, they're not going to help you to forge that connection. So for me, it's about something that happens over time, and it took me a long time to be able to use those very traditional decks with the stripped down pips, and I'm really glad I can do it now because I very much enjoy those decks aesthetically. I find them really pleasing to work with. I want to know your secret to being super social. I'm very introverted and often avoid social gatherings, even though I know it's not good to isolate myself, but my social anxiety gets in the way of me living my life. How do you handle such things? Well, first of all, I don't necessarily have social anxiety, so obviously that's to my great advantage. For me, I enjoy spending time with other people, and I really enjoy connection and discussion, and I love all the hijinks of that kind of thing. However, the downtime that I have has got to be a very specific way in order to enable me to be highly social. You know, so I need to be able to recharge my batteries in solitude. I need to be able to put time aside for spiritual work. I also need to be able to avoid messaging people every single day. So I'm not really about communicating, you know, every day or even every other day with friends. I very often will just retreat into my own little kind of vortex and spend time away from communication. A lot of people obviously perceive me to be very extroverted, but in fact I require a lot of time in solitude and in isolation in order to be the level of extroverted that I am when I'm in people's company. So I would definitely recommend thinking about the quality of downtime that you have and the quality of time alone in solitude that you have, because I feel like a full battery recharge is definitely required if you're going to be spending time in the company of other people. I also feel like for people who are spiritual, for people who are on a spiritual journey, for people who are very spiritually perceptive, it is critical that you practice some kind of centering, grounding and protection before you go to be in the company of others, and then when you get home again and you're on your own again. You need to be able to cleanse your energy, to come back to a place of center, to be very strong in your idea of what is your shit and what is somebody else's shit. And I think a lot of spiritual people are missing out on the fact that that is important for them, and they're struggling as a result. So I would definitely ask you to consider what you do in the way of protective spiritual work before you go to be in company, and then after you return from being in other people's company as well. That is very important. Over the years, I've become much more comfortable with letting people know who I am, how I'm going to behave, and how it's going to be. So in my mid-20s, I definitely made a massive effort to behave in ways that friends wanted me to behave, or in ways that I thought I had to behave. So with communication, for example, in my mid-20s, I would just try to communicate on the level that friends wanted and expected me to communicate, and it would put me into burnout really quickly, and I didn't enjoy it. Now, in my coming up to mid-30s, I am really clear and straight down the line about the fact that I don't communicate that way, and that unless it's urgent or it involves questions that need to be answered on a time sensitive basis, I may just drop out of communication for a couple of weeks. Like that's who I am. That's how I need to be. So I'm much more comfortable with owning my hermit side, and I'm much more comfortable when new friends come into my life to be very raw and real about how I am with communication. And I expect friends not to take it personally. There are lots of people in my life who are way more naturally communicative than I am, and they are much more frequently communicative than I am. And I don't think I would still have those friends in my life if I hadn't have been upfront right at the beginning of the connection and told them, like, hey, you know what, I'm not the kind of person that's going to reply to you on WhatsApp every day or call you once a week. It's not really how I roll. I want my communication with people to be meaningful, and I want to feel enhanced as I'm having those communications with people, and I want to feel like I'm giving everything I can give to those people, and therefore I'm not likely to hold myself to this extremely high standard of frequent communication, because I would be burned out, you know. And I need a lot of downtime, especially with the job that I do full time. I'm a counsellor and a card slinger. There's no way that I can reply to people as frequently as potentially they would reply to me, or they reply to each other. So it's a little bit about owning who you are and being comfortable with that as well. And then once you've owned it and you're comfortable with it, and you're comfortable to tell people that that's how you roll, you tend to find that you're a lot less anxious about what people are going to think of you leaving a party before the end of the night, or not replying to their text or whatever. Because you've been upfront and you've been straight with them. I don't know if that's at all helpful, because like I said, I don't suffer with social anxiety. I do suffer with some low-level communication anxiety, but it's certainly not the same as like social anxiety or social phobia, and I acknowledge that. You know, I'm quite a confident person. I'm quite an outgoing person. When I'm in the midst of company, I will be a peacock. I will be the life of the party. I will be, you know, propping up the fucking kitchen sideboard chatting shit, because that is who I am and that's what I'm like. But I do need to have really big bouts of downtime and really big bouts of kind of isolation away from communicating with people in order to make my extroversion into a reality, and in order to maintain it. You know, I've got to have that other side, and I won't have friends in my life on any deep basis who aren't prepared to accept that. And I think that's helped me a lot. Besides a ton of practice, what other ways can I build my confidence as a tarot reader? I'm 27 and I've found I'm more self-conscious when I read for clients a decade or more older than me. I know the cards always have a great message to share, but I feel a bit inadequate as a messenger since I have less life experience. I think this is imposter syndrome. Who am I to give advice, even if it's via the cards? Any tips for overcoming this? You know, you kind of have to do a little bit of a mindset shift in a way. You have to ask yourself, first of all, who are you to assume that youth has got anything to do with ignorance? Think about the time that you spend around kids. You know, I think there's so much wisdom in children. They see things in a way that is a lot of the time unfettered by ego and unhindered by insecurity. And therefore they seem almost like more divine in a way a lot of the time. And you have to think of it like that. You have to be like, well, who am I to say that youth has got something to do with ignorance? And think about what that means when you say that. Like, would you dismiss, for example, the thoughts and feelings and emotions of teenagers because they're younger than you? I'd be willing to bet that you wouldn't be prepared to dismiss people that are younger than you, and you wouldn't be prepared to write them off and see their feelings or their perspectives or their capabilities as inadequate in comparison to your own. So you've really got to put your own belief system into practice here. If you know that you wouldn't be prepared to write somebody off because they're younger than you, then who the fuck are you to write yourself off just because you're younger than your client? You know, so it's really a massive mindset shift that you've got to do. That's where you need to come at it from. You need to think about what you're doing to yourself and what you're telling yourself, the negative story you're telling yourself about your age. And then think to yourself, would I do that to someone else? Would I turn around and tell a 20-year-old that they don't know what they're talking about, you know? Would I have less time and space for people that are younger than me? Do I think because I'm 27 that I'm so fucking great in comparison to someone who's 17? And, you know, when you answer these questions, lean into your own willingness to appreciate that wisdom comes at all different ages. So you've really got to do that mindset shift and then realise that the way that you're shit-talking yourself for being the age you are, that's actually not what you believe. It's not in alignment with what you believe about wisdom as it equates with age. I've had the most mind-expanding, awesome chats with people that are 10 years younger than me, 15 years younger than me. I've learned so much from kids who don't even understand what bills are yet, and they still fucking believe in the Easter Bunny. But there's a wisdom, they have a wisdom that I can tap into. And of course I've experienced great wisdom from people that are much older than me, but I'm going to be completely clear with you, okay? I've also experienced a lot of fucking ignorance and a lot of people that are living absolutely shrouded in shadow. When I think about the experiences that I've had chatting with people of all different ages, I know that it doesn't make any sense for me to write myself off because I'm one age as opposed to another age. Everybody grows at different rates and everybody ends up in different places in their lives, you know, at different ages. So you've got to think about your mindset and you've got to ask yourself why you're telling yourself a story that you don't actually even believe in. Why are you holding yourself up to a standard that you wouldn't actually hold others up to? And then hopefully something will flip in your brain box, and from there you'll be able to just kind of own it. You might find that in your particular case as well, you do have a few memories of kind of being demeaned or disempowered or feeling diminished by someone in your past who made you feel like you were too young to know what you were talking about, you know, or you'll understand when you're older, or just basically dismissing something really important that you had to say based on age. And that might have really gone in as well, and it might have done its yucky, insidious work to make you feel shitty about the fact that you are only in your late 20s or whatever. And, you know, that's just shit. That sucks. You've got to look at those experiences and think, you know what, I did feel diminished by that, and now I've taken that on as truth, and I need to unpick that conditioning. It's not true that I'm ignorant or incapable because of my age. Do you feel that there is a shadow side to positive thinking? Yeah, I do actually, and I've made a video about it which I will link for you down below. Also, if you're interested in this kind of thing, I would recommend a particular book, and I can't think of the name of it now, but it's about the use of positive thinking as it relates to helping cancer patients. And that's really interesting as well, just the insidious nature of having positive thinking foisted upon people that are going through cancer treatment. And I think that's the kind of thing that's important to look at when we think about positive thinking as it relates to shadow. I suppose this goes into other conversations about the idea of blaming somebody for their situation based on how they might be thinking about it, encouraging people not to explore the full spectrum of their emotions because we're telling people that certain emotions or certain responses are bad or dangerous or could lead to death. I'm not about any of that shit, and it really almost boils my blood sometimes when I see that kind of rhetoric going around and making an impact on people's lives. I don't want that stuff to impact people's lives. I want people to understand that there's room for the entire spectrum of emotion, and I do think there's some really damaging messages around the idea of positive thinking as a way of life, and the importance of actually just kind of ridding ourselves of any emotional response, any thought pattern that might welcome in danger or death or darkness. It's like danger, death and darkness are all part of the fucking program, and we need to look at all of those things and acknowledge all of those things too. And that's not to say that positive thinking doesn't have its place and isn't powerful, but I definitely think that there are a lot of messages and voices and ideas regarding only focusing on the positive, and that's really scary, and it doesn't leave room for people to be human and to have human reactions and responses and to be held in that humanity and be supported in that humanity. I think some of the dialogue around the necessity of positive thinking is very fear-based, and I hate to see that, you know. It's a shame. It's a crying shame. I've watched your videos about chronic pain and spirituality, and I was wondering if there are any go-to crystals, oils, teas or practices that have helped you, or anything that you would recommend. Yeah, tons of different things actually. When I was really at my worst with my back injury and the pain was really difficult to manage, and pain management was, do you know what, even the phrase pain management just gives me hives. When that was at its absolute worst, I used to really love listening to binaural beats. I used to love listening to Gregorian chant. I used to love listening to just long guided meditations that helped me to just relax, you know, or really just connect with myself again. Those kinds of things were really helpful because I would be lying down for long periods of time and I would be unable to move. I'd be unable to relax for long periods of time. I'd be waiting for meds to kick in for a long period of time, you know, so those things helped me to feel guided and they helped me to feel like I was doing something positive despite my situation. And I also got really into listening to podcasts, listening to interviews and things like that, so that I could feel like I was still feeding my brain and I was still, you know, giving my brain things to think of and focus on, but it didn't involve holding a book, which was really difficult for me to do. I did a lot of lying on my side for about 3 or 4 years back there. So it was really useful to be able to just listen to something and just learn basically and think and allow my brain to still be functioning, even though my body was really, you know, what I felt like my body was fucking betraying me at the time, to be completely honest. One of the main incense staples that I've used for years and years that's really important to me, that I really love, is patchouli. Patchouli reminds me of some of the happiest times when I was growing up. It reminds me of connecting to my inner witch at that young age when I was really excited and open to all of these spiritual ideas, and I was having my first, you know, deep spiritual experiences that I could really register as being spiritual in nature. So patchouli just reminds me of personal freedom and excitement and magical inspiration and being creative spiritually. And burning patchouli is very comforting. I burned a lot of patchouli when I was at my worst with my back. I also burned a lot of opium incense when I was at my worst with my back. It's very relaxing. Opium is a super relaxing incense. It's great when you're going to sleep. If you can mix it with lavender, all the better. You know, it just helps you to get those extra few minutes or few hours when sleep is difficult for you. I had a really bad relationship with sleep when my back pain was at its worst because I couldn't sleep for that many hours. I would wake up in excruciating pain, but I did need to get enough hours sleep, otherwise it would be more difficult to deal with my circumstances when I was awake because I was sleep deprived. I wasn't getting enough sleep. So sleep was this weird negotiation for ages, and I did find that things like lavender bags, you know, like pouches that you put under the pillow with different combinations of crystals, and then you've got the lavender in there, that really helps with going to sleep. Sleepy tea is helpful. Obviously also you can get over-the-counter sleeping tablets, but you don't want to become dependent upon them, and I certainly didn't, so I definitely used a lot of sleep aids and stuff. And with regard to crystals, I really think the big three for me when it comes to dealing with chronic pain are black tourmaline, jet and black obsidian, and they are just so intense for getting your mental health and mental well-being where it needs to be when you're dealing with chronic pain, feeling like you know where your strength is, feeling that you can connect with the core of your being, that you can get through your challenges, that you can get through the darkest times. I love those 3 crystals, and I've done a lot of work with them, and I've just held them when I felt really shitty. Music was really important for me when I was at my very worst with chronic pain as well. You know, these things really just made all the difference. How do you deal with family who think that what you're doing is rubbish or it's all in your head? I just can't imagine letting someone talk to me for that long like that. You know, I can't imagine allowing somebody to keep communicating their thoughts and feelings about my personal belief system in that way without erecting a boundary swiftly and surely, to be honest. But I guess it does depend on your situation. If you're still living at home, for example, and you've got a very critical parent, you need to find ways of dealing with that. You can't just walk out and never come back because that's where you live. So I guess in those circumstances, it's really just about knowing why you are doing what you're doing and why it's important to you. And I also think, and this is something that I did say in a previous Q&A when I spoke about my views on the broom closet, but I think it could stand to be kind of underlined here. I think that it's important that we don't push ourselves to be super open about what we're doing and what our beliefs are and everything else if the crowd around us is actually hostile. There's no point in exposing yourself to great deals of hostility because you somehow feel like it's your duty to do that, or it's a way to be faithful and loyal to your spiritual practice. You don't owe anybody openness when it comes to your beliefs, your practices, etc. And I would definitely recommend avoiding situations where you're just putting yourself in a really crappy place and you're leaving yourself open to criticism and mockery or even emotional abuse, because you feel like you should be open about it or it's not right to stay quiet on it. I think that's bollocks, to be honest. I think it's okay to be very subtle and very discreet about what you're doing if you know that the company that you're keeping in a given situation is hostile company and they're going to give you shit for what you're doing or what you believe. You know, sometimes we do have to get ourselves to a better place, to a more liberated place, to a place of freedom before we can express ourselves quite as openly and honestly as we want to. And I think that's just a matter of safety for a lot of people, physical safety, professional safety, you know, financial safety, and also emotional safety. It's not always the right time to be super duper open about what we're doing spiritually or what our beliefs are. So I would definitely encourage you not to feel badly about keeping things to yourself and not being quite so open if that's what the situation requires. Have you ever experienced tarot burnout? Oh yeah, definitely. Actually, I wrote a Facebook post about this not too long ago, weirdly enough. I've definitely experienced tarot burnout. Of course, I work with the cards pretty much every day. I think it would be highly unrealistic to expect myself to want to keep working with a tool every single day without having any kind of break or anything like that. And I do go through times where I'm less enamored with the cards or more enamored with the cards. And sometimes when I'm less enamored with them, it's a case of pulling out a deck that I haven't worked with for a long time, reading a tarot book that I haven't read before, going and finding some fresh interpretations and different perspectives from different blogs or videos to get me back in the mood, you know. So it's really shaking things up and taking on new influences and allowing that to provide me with that excitement and that spark that's missing for me. And sometimes it is just about taking a break, and I can't take a break for as long as a lot of other people because I work full-time professionally doing tarot. It's a big chunk of the work that I do with clients, so it's not necessarily something I can take a huge break from, but I definitely have my weekends or my half a weeks where I take time off and I don't look at any cards and I don't play with any cards and I just let myself enjoy having that break. I think sometimes people are really freaked out by tarot burnout situations because they last quite a long time, and after a few weeks of not wanting to pick up a deck, not wanting to work with the cards, I think people just get really frightened that it's all over. But if you think about my situation, I got into tarot in my early teens and I was in love with tarot right up until my late teens, and then I took quite a few years of break there. I just stopped playing with the cards. I didn't even own a deck. You know, it was like sort of, I was about 17 or 18, I guess, when I last owned even a partial deck. And then in my mid-20s, when I broke up with my long-term partner and my life got put into upheaval, I was suddenly like, you know what, I want a fucking tarot deck. It just sort of came upon me. I was like, it's been quite a few years now, but I need a deck, like something's calling me back to tarot, and I really want that again. I want that feeling again. And so I started all over again. So, you know, that was a long tarot break, so I don't worry about it. And I came back to it with full force. And I think a lot of people do worry once it's been a few months, but you come back to it when you're in need of it. It's always there for you. Don't feel bad. Don't feel like it's, you know, it's a lover, for example, that you have to have regular time with, otherwise you're cheating or you're neglecting or whatever. Tarot will be there for you. And I think a lot of people put the cards down fully expecting never to pick them up again, and then that moment comes in life where they're ready for it or they need it, and it's there for them, and they can you know, jump right in where they left off. If you were a tree, what kind would you be and why? I'd be a silver birch because they're stunning. They're my favourite tree ever. Honey bunnies, thank you so much for accompanying me on this massive Q&A. I've really enjoyed myself. I still have tons more questions that need to be answered, and I will definitely do so in future Q&As. And when it's time for me to collect more questions from you guys, I will most likely do so on Instagram. So please make sure that you are following my Instagram account if you would like an opportunity to ask me a question when I next put the call out for questions. That would be really amazing. I would love to be able to answer your question. I leave all of my social media links down below, so please do go ahead and follow me on any platforms that you're on where you would like to keep up with me. And please also check out my Bonds of Shadow exclusive video series, guys. It is available to purchase until the 6th of May. If you're watching this at around the time of upload, you still have some time to get your hands on the 10 exclusive videos that are going to be coming out during May. I'm really excited about them. They're all about shadows in human relationships and really just grappling with stuff like narcissism, betrayal, envy, superiority complexes, game playing, gaslighting. I'm going into a lot of dark relationship shit, and we're going to work this stuff out. So if you do have some pennies to spare and you want to invest in some exclusive content from yours truly, you can go over to my online store and grab Bonds of Shadow right now, and you will be added to the exclusive email list for the password protected videos. So I'll leave that link down below too. Oh, and I also have a few new things over in the online store as well. I have launched a new reading called Voice of the Muse, and I've also launched another 2-part video reading, which is a bit of an audio-visual extravaganza called Tea with the Goddess, which is based on some personal things that I do in my own practice, and I'm now offering that experience to clients. So I'll leave links to both of those things below, and I'll also leave a link below to my spiritual counselling sessions. There are so many people messaging me lately, emailing me, etc., asking what is the best way to start working with me, if they want to talk to me about their issues, if they want to troubleshoot, if they want to life plan. And I would say the best thing to do is to go ahead and purchase yourself a spiritual counselling session and get booked into my schedule to chat to me via Skype. So I'll leave the spiritual counselling session down below as well. Don't be shy, honey bunnies, give it a try. If you want to work with me and you want the opportunity to answer back, if you would like to have me but with the opportunity to interrupt and ask questions and get kind of a dialogue going and have a discussion and hopefully come out with some amazing insights and useful tools, spiritual counselling session is the way to go. So much love until next time, honey bunnies. Blessed be. Mwah.